Sports fans, we're back for another edition of Moving the Needle podcast. I'm stoked because I've got Jonny Thompson from Fit4Racing. Now, I have come across his Instagram and it's super pro. I'm actually really motivated to get my setup even better because he's got 2 cameras in the background, a mic running for me. So we're looking forward to picking each other's brains, but more me picking his brain. But what I will say before we get in, I found an interesting stat in terms of YouTube, and I know Jonny's super into his visual for his business, but 74% of people that are watching my channel consistently are not subscribed. So if you're enjoying this content, and especially, yeah, exactly, Jonny, especially if you're enjoying my content, and I know you're going to enjoy his stuff if you haven't seen on Instagram, hit that subscribe button. So that's the only housekeeping. But Jonny from Fit4Racing, now I've seen your awesome videos. I even snuck a workout in today before this, and I did the split leg deadlift. I gave it a little try because I'm still keeping active and fit. It's a habit I've lucky to have kept. But why don't you fill the listener in on your background and where you are now? Because I think you'll do it better justice than me.
Okay, well, in a nutshell, because I really want this podcast to be high value to the listener, not just about how the pros train, but also how that relates to everyday riders, the 99%, and everything in between. So my background, I worked in forensics. I was a forensic expert for a lot of years, and I found CrossFit. I was a mountain biker, social mountain biker, I'll call it. So I never really raced. And what I found is that because I was into training, as you would in the late 90s, I was early 20s then, and, I'm giving away my age. That's 43. I was into like the bodybuilding style so that then I would look better. But then I'd do that in the winter, and then I'd get on my bike in the spring, and I really sucked. But by the end of the summer, I felt really fit. And I never got the balance for many years of how to look good and perform well. And then whilst researching conditioning styles, more like sports-specific stuff and what people are doing outside of bodybuilding and powerlifting, then I found CrossFit. And don't turn off right now. Honestly, this isn't a CrossFit plug.
Well, I've got a few questions on the stigma of CrossFit as well. We'll get to those later.
I'm glad. Yeah, I can give you an open and honest opinion of my CrossFit journey. But it was pretty intense, and I was absorbed in it. And I found that one off season, because whilst I was researching, CrossFit did a really good job of getting media out. So I would always see workouts and go to their homepage and see these things. And I was like middle-aged women doing kettlebell swings, running, pull-ups, and they'd always have a workout of the day. And in the comment, you could post your time. And because it came up so much, I thought, well, I'm not that interested because of the demographic that I see there, but I'll give it a go. I'll do really well, and I'll never have to do it again. And the first workout I did was Helen, which was 3 rounds of 400-meter run, 12 pull-ups, 21 kettlebell swings. I thought I can do all of those things. But by round 2, I was like, God damn it, I can't do these things combined. And it really sucked to see that I was low down on the times where ultimately I would class myself as fit. And so then, obviously, because I lacked there and there was a platform to be able to, I guess, quantify my performance, I got totally addicted to increasing my performance, where I thought, right, I'll win the CrossFit Games before it was even the CrossFit Games. These like early days. I'll win CrossFit and then I'll never have to do it again. And that journey just went on for years and years. I ended up leaving forensics because I opened a gym. So whilst I was training, people would join me and be like, what is it you're doing? This is down at the police headquarters gym. And I was in the sports hall, like throwing things around. And before I knew it, I had a group of people I was training with, which was really cool. I did a course so I could legitimately coach them because I was maxing out credit cards on buying equipment specifically for it. And I thought I could charge them £3 a session, and we could basically chip together and get the equipment we needed. So it kind of developed from that. And then we put a few holes in the floor, and then the PTs at the police gym they were all like, oh, what's this fad that Jonny's doing? This is undermining what we're doing with the police fitness tests and stuff. So ultimately, I found a unit where I thought, right, I need a minimum number of members to have this unit so we can all train together. So I had no plan of making it into a legitimate business. It was more of a social scene where I got, much like riding, I guess. So when you find
really
yourself
awesome.
in a group of completely different people riding because you love it together. And we found that with CrossFit. So the social side was brilliant. And then after a little while, more members came. I started paying attention to marketing. This was when my wife got pregnant with our first child. He was now 10. I read my first marketing book because what I wanted to say to my kid was that I wasn't working a full-time job to afford the mortgage and that I didn't see them in the evenings and mornings because of my hobby. So then I thought, well, wouldn't it be great, because no one told me this, that if you were really good at something, then you don't really have to worry about money if you do it really well. And what I wanted from, I guess, that lifestyle choice then was to develop a business that really encompassed what I enjoyed, so I could enjoy 100% of my time instead of working to go on holidays to recover from working and look forward to retirement. So ultimately, we had a bit of a transition where I went part-time at work, the gym got bigger, and then 2016, I think I registered Fit4Racing because I was approached by Jonny Walker's manager. Jonny Walker, the hard enduro Red Bull athlete.
Yeah, I was researching that. That was one of my questions, like how do you meet him and get to work with him? That's cool.
So his manager from Manchester, they had a really good CrossFit gym down there with some really good athletes. Sam Briggs was winning the CrossFit Games. She trained down there. He was in that circle. So he understood the benefits of general physical preparedness and strength and conditioning. And I was local to Jonny. He was in Keswick. I'm in Penrith. It's like 12, 15 miles. And they came along one day and I had no clue who Jonny Walker was. And ultimately, they wanted me to train him. I said, well, the best I can do, because I'm working a full-time job, is you can hop in classes, which at the time, on reflection, was a bad opportunity missed, let's say. But I didn't see it as that because I didn't know. A year later, so I didn't see him again. A year later, I thought, well, actually, this is when I read my marketing books and I thought, can I make it a legitimate business? Can I start training a handful of people to subsidize the income? And Jonny, so I'd already been approached by a couple of people, general population people. So I had 2 general populations. And then I messaged Jonny and said, oh, Jonny, I've now got availability to do one-on-ones. Do you fancy it? He'd moved to France for a year and he'd just got back. He's like, yeah, let's do it. Came in the next week, did 1 session. I didn't know what to charge or where it was going to go, but I got a message that night. He's like, what would you charge me for 10 sessions? So I gave him a price. What would you charge me for 20? What would you charge me for 40? He's a complete haggler. And I think he got me up to like 80 sessions in a bulk buy. I don't know whether he just got a sponsorship deal and loads of money in the bank and he needed to spend it, but ultimately he bought a shit ton of sessions. And I was like, well, this is fantastic. And then about 2 weeks later, he said to me, can I bring my friends? And, I want to do things differently from what you would normally see a PT doing. I'm not a PT. I've never been a PT. I've been a group class conditioning coach and now a sports specific conditioning coach. But ultimately, my time then, I was like, you can bring as many people as you like because you're paying for my time. You paid for that. And the way I saw it was, it would be better to have more people training with Jonny than on his own because you get that camaraderie and, the competition.
And the competitiveness. Yeah.
Exactly. So he brought Brad Anderson. So he was #1 UK motocross rider. Jamie Law, he was really good as well. And they're all kind of locals around here. And Adam Brayton, I think he put a bit of resistance up to start with because he was a Strava addict and he's a workaholic. So he was on the road bike loads and he was doing conditioning or circuit classes, let's say. And in his words, he came one time and he said, as soon as I did that session, I knew this is what I was supposed to be doing. And, he hit it really hard. And I think Jonny was fantastic. He had to move to Andorra for tax reasons. So it was unfortunate that he left the scene. And it kind of dissolved with other people. We got more and, triple around. But ultimately, Adam became our staple. But when Jonny came, I had the idea because I had already followed programs by pros for CrossFit. And I classed myself as a decent CrossFit competitor where I was winning some national competitions. And ultimately, I saw the value in following a structured program for somebody that was accessible. But it took a whole year for me to understand Jonny, build a relationship with him and Adam and the other guys, for me to propose that I could do that for riders. At the same time, obviously, I didn't want to go straight in and say, right, I'm a mountain bike fitness coach after coaching someone for a couple of weeks. So that year of exploration, building trust, Jonny was like, yeah, go for it. So I had no clue what to do, how to do it. I took a month off work, built my own website. And
you do it yourself, this website? Because I was going to ask about website and app. Like, that's not easy to
the
do,
new
right?
website. So that was a progression. The original website, I built that myself. And ultimately, people were paying me through PayPal and I was sending out PDF workouts to them at £45 a month. And I think in the first month, we got 10 people signed up. We got another 20 the month after. And I was like, well, actually, this is really good because this is exactly what I wanted, was to be able to financially support a shift from full-time employment into something that I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And what I found was I was sending out these programs to people that wanted individualized programs. And I understand that. But what I found was I was copying and pasting loads. And I thought, well, actually, damn, what if Steve talks to Bob and they're on the same program? Their needs are the same, but it's not individual. And I basically felt like a fraud. So I thought, why don't I just do a sports-specific program? So we'll do hard enduro, downhill, enduro MTB. I emailed everyone. I said, we're going to make this shift. You're going to be on the same program as everyone else doing your sport. And after the first week, the response was fantastic. Like, this is way better than it was before. Even though I was doing specific things for their needs, a general program they were finding was better for them. And then it just developed and it was then infinitely scalable. But the money that I generated through that went straight back into the business. That's why I have really good cameras. Because
and the gym behind you, I would presume that's the one I see in the videos.
Yeah. So the progression happened fast. We were generating money. We were doing a good service. And I found that eventually PDFs weren't enough because I was getting so many emails on what's this movement, and I can't just write back, just Google it. And some of the movements I was making up because I understood the movement patterns of riders. So I was like, this variation. So I had to try and write the descriptions. And what I found was filming a talking head video and embedding that into the email meant that I could explain how to do it. And then that progressed into actually demoing the movements every week. And in the end, we ended up embedding these YouTube videos into emails. And when we had the platform for the website that I built, all it was ultimately was a payment platform. So we then approached a guy to build a better website specifically for our needs, because there was nothing out there that would allow you to do a weekly video, timestamp it with the relevant workouts, and do that continuously. Because the market now is for people to create a program with a movement library and just stick in there the movements with links to the library. So it's all front end work and then passive income afterwards. It's like, well, no, because a back squat can be done 50 different ways depending on what you want to achieve with it. And they don't also know why they're doing it that particular way. So it was good for me as a coach who wanted people to learn as well as do, and do the things like basically do the movements as prescribed, as I would expect the best results from them. It was an opportunity to explain each week, each movement, how to do it, why to do it. And then we were getting really good feedback from that. And even now, there's no platform out there. We developed an app 2 years ago. It cost way more money than I expected. But ultimately, we have a platform which is fantastic because I can still upload videos once a week. In those videos, they have 3 training, like 6 days training, and each one is me going through it every single week. There's no platform out there that does that because, well, ultimately, people want to make loads of money with as little work as possible. And that's, for me, I wouldn't feel cool doing that because I owe it to someone that really wants to see people improve versus taking everyone's money and just hoping for the best. I want to be able to give the value, the extra value, by subscribing to our program because of the way that I can coach it, let's say.
Yeah, and I think they must feel like they get individual coaching, but they're seeing you do the videos and things like that. So I really like that. And maybe as we shift gears, I can hear how the passion has come through in this business. But let's not gloss over you've clearly shown credibility because you've got some really up and coming superstars on your roster now. Adam Brayton being one of the first to prove your concept and share your value system. So maybe as we shift gears, like speak to me about your view on strength and conditioning in mountain biking. You've become known and you've niched into mountain biking and hard enduro moto, which have quite a lot of similarities. So yeah, maybe as we shift gears, like let's start digging into some of those notes we shared on. You listened to a podcast with Jamie Reed, and I think later we definitely must discuss what you agree and disagree, because I think that conversation gets everyone thinking, and he loves that as well, right? Because he's pursuing studies in trying to get the data, which I think we all agreed isn't actually out there. A lot of
Yeah,
it's theory. We have some data, and you also are big on saying, I'm not even all for testing all the time, which is data collection, but you're like, there's so many more nuances. So enough for me. Like if you want to just chat to your views on strength conditioning, mountain bike specific stuff, and then we go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. That's ideal. You've phrased that really well because Jamie and I are friends. And the important thing to understand is that there are different styles of training. And ultimately, you'll find that some people are attracted to a style of training because, that's what they expect or that's what they can dig. So whether it's testing on a road bike setup for VO2 max and then be doing intervals on that to increase their fitness with some supplemental strength and conditioning, or whether it's strength and conditioning heavy and they just ride their bike, both work. But I guess what I really wanted to put across in this podcast is the data currently isn't there to suggest that there's the best way to do anything in ultimately a skills-based sport, which is mountain biking. From the very start, my stance on that was that my job is to eliminate the element of fitness. So that isn't a defining factor in you expressing your skill on the track. Whether you're a new mountain biker or a World Cup winner, you shouldn't feel like you get to the bottom and you were too gassed, you were too weak, you wouldn't move well enough at the end, or your mind wasn't focused because you were fatigued. So we eliminate that so you can perform. And there's a lot of desire now to look at testing to maximize performance, but ultimately that takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, and it's very complicated in an area that we don't actually know is that efficient or effective. So when we're looking at increasing VO2 max, that's one metric. And I know Jamie is quite hard on the fact that VO2 max is the gold standard of fitness. and that how that can basically increasing that will increase your performance. But I have that data too. It's not that I don't test VO2 max. I do with some people that desire it as a tool to be able to look at that and have more buy-in. Because ultimately, the VO2 max test will clearly define zones. Those zone training in energy systems, Jamie went into fine detail about that. I'm not so bothered. Those zones on a road bike and doing intervals, does that really reflect the demands of a downhill section? Which for us, when we're talking downhill racing and enduro racing, yeah, there's obviously benefits for enduro to have the capacity in transitions, but the real time is on the descent. So a VO2 max where you're measuring basically your aerobic capacity, your ability for your body to use oxygen in the muscle to get more energy, basically. But then you look at people like mixed martial artists versus road cyclists, and you think, right, we probably look at movement patterns and the demands on the body more similarly to mixed martial arts than road cycling for downhill. So why is it such a big deal to be increasing that VO2 max? And a lot of the testing with Moxie on muscles in the legs, that's fine, but how much pedaling do some guys do on World Cup tracks? You know, is that pedal power or efficiency really that important versus your ability to move your body under stress, dynamically, fast, and in semi-isometric conditioning workout type like positions? Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, I mean, it's such a challenging topic, right? You
yeah,
mentioned right at the beginning, like it's such a skill-based sport. And I've said some controversial things off the record. I said a couple things. Even in XC, where they would test, and I think you would agree, like VO2 and all those functional training, the FTPs, like we can see the data on how much has improved, like your engine. And then speaking to some coaches, okay, how much time, effort, testing goes into get another second or two on the 2-minute climb, right? From a very high base that these pros are at. I'm just going to go from the XC side. And then you say, okay, I'm pretty sure in less time and less effort, I get you 2 seconds on the downhill. And that's kind of where I would relate back. Like, I understand your concept back. Like, you need them all, but where are you going to focus? Like, where are your deficiencies? And I said another thing, like,
exactly. That's
I've
the
been
point.
asked
Where
off
are
the
your
record,
deficiencies?
yeah, and I've been asked off the record, like, does doping exist in downhill? And I can say that out loud because, like, people that follow cycling understand it has been in the sport, right? Not a controversial topic. And I was like, it obviously training to the maximum and doing everything would help. But at the end of the day, you would quickly notice it's because it's such a skill-based sport. Is it even worth the risk? Is it even worth the money? Is it
and
even worth tarnishing your name? Because you got to get down the hill on using your skill. You could obviously be less gassed at the end or do a better last split, which certainly will help your results. But I don't know if you can go from like being 20th to first off just training, or lack of a better word, illegally doing it. So that's my little riff on, like, I understand where you're coming from and I understand where Jamie's coming from as well. Like, Greg Minnaar has proved Jamie's theory quite strongly. And then also Greg Minnaar started adding more strength and conditioning as the scene started changing with your Aaron Gwynns and your Amri Perrons and your Loic Boonies. These are strong guys, really strong guys.
Yeah.
Both aerobically and anaerobically and strength and conditioning.
Yeah. So to flip back onto it being a skills-based sport, ultimately, I ended up selling my CrossFit gyms. I fell out of love with CrossFit because it became a sport in itself, which was a specialist sport of heavy load and multiple reps. So when I was going to competitions and those guys twice my size, clearly doping, and you look at the CrossFit Games and those guys are absolutely jacked. I have no doubt that maybe not now when they're competing, but they're certainly cycling with some performance enhancing drugs, which for me then, it's like being a road cyclist and not doing EPO in the late 90s. You would not make it onto a team. So mountain biking for me is perfect because I know that by doping, it's not going to give you the edge to be first. It might help some people come up, but ultimately it's down to your skill. So where I was in a sport that you basically had to dope to get better and perform to the highest level, and if you didn't, you just wouldn't be there, to a sport where it's more wholesome, where we're conditioning people in a decent, high integrity environment where doping just, in my experience, isn't a thing. I haven't spoken to anyone, and I have really close relationships with my athletes. No one's even asked me as like, do you think I should? Like, no one's even bringing it to the table for me to consider. So for me, even when I was coaching CrossFit, I had people come to me and say, Jonny, do you think steroids will help my CrossFit? I'm like, of course I will. Of course I will. But that's not me saying to you, do steroids, because ultimately, what are you going to do? Podium at a local event? Is that going to give you fulfillment because you were juicing? Ultimately, at the end of it, you'll probably reflect back and think, oh God, well, I kind of cheated. So was it worth it? Did I deserve it? So that's why I love mountain biking so much, because doping doesn't seem to be such a big thing. And that's why we're not doing road cycling programs or gravel programs, because that's just another level of, you are an engine on a bike versus you are a holistic athlete in a skills-based sport. And for me, it's just a different frame of mind versus like full performance and the sport that we love. You know what I mean? Like, there's guys out there that absolutely whoop me. They're out of shape. Like, I'm not the best guy on the bike on downhills whatsoever. And there's guys that, they smoke and eat takeaways all of the time, and they'll go to Bike Park Wales and absolutely kick my ass. So there is a balance between the two.
Yeah. And speaking of balance, so speak to the strength and conditioning. That's obviously where you are in business, you're passionate, you come from that side. And I guess it is newer to cycling. Like, I guess when mountain bikers and downhillers started training, they were borrowing programs from road, maybe a little bit from motocross. We used to ride motocross and stuff. They've probably been strength and conditioning a little bit longer than us, as just a guess. So yeah, let's speak to that balance. And like, you made a few notes of, like, we spoke about deficiencies. We spoke about when you're fit enough, then that's not going to get you that much more gain. And you'd rather see someone maybe working on, shall we call them weaknesses in the strength conditioning?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is cool about mountain biking, because ultimately you have, let's say, your conditioning ability, your VO2 max aerobic ability, and then you have your skill. And those three things, depending on where you're deficient, define where the area that you should be working in. So for me, probably obviously, I should be spending more time on the bike because I have a good base fitness and conditioning. I should be practicing skill more. If, say, on the World Cup circuit, there are riders that are gassed or weak or not focused at the bottom of a run, they need to do more, so that then they can 100% commit to every feature until the finishing line. And that reflects also when you scale it down to everyday riders. How do you feel after coming downhill for 3 to 5 minutes? If you're gassed at the bottom and you feel dangerous and you're not enjoying it, you're getting arm pump and you're gassed out and your friends are leaving you, not because of skill, but how long you can hold on to that skill. Do you know what I mean? So the balance then comes in, how do you define your deficiency? So everyone that's listening can probably say, right, am I unfit? Is it a struggle to ride with my friends to get to a downhill section? Am I not conditioned enough? So when I get to the downhill section, I'm not able to perform for the full run? Or I'm able to do both and my skill is lacking. So people are taking, they're taking off after a corner because they took it better than I did. And that balance isn't necessarily so defined for some people because they might be on a level throughout. And this is how we fill the void with the programs that we produce on a sense of general physical preparedness. So that then always you're increasing your conditioning, strength, and ability to move, as well as, say, on the enduro program, that VO2 max end of it, which then leaves you only with your skill, which I can't do on a program because I'm not about to film videos of techniques on the bike so that you can go out, because I don't really believe that works. I've watched so many videos on how to do manuals and still shit. I know the fundamentals. You can find that stuff on the internet anywhere.
It's practice and reps, like in anything.
Yeah, it's practice and reps, and people tend to shuffle towards what they're already good at.
Yes, in life, we generally do that, yeah.
Yeah, so we have powerlifters coming on the program saying, I don't want to lose any strength. And so, well, what's the point in deadlifting 250 kilos if you can't do 100 kilos 20 times? Because you gassed out. You need to take away your specialism and put into there more of a general fitness frame, so that then you're basically able as a bike, let's call it a gravity mountain bike athlete. Do you know what I mean? Did that make sense?
Well, some of it does, but some of it's above my pay grade, and that's why I'm here trying to get the nuggets out of you for sure.
Yeah, please, dissect bits, because I don't want things to be too technical.
No, and that was your goal. That was one of your goals of the podcast. Let's try simplify it. So where do we agree then, right? We've got someone like Greg Menard that I think is more old school with an insane engine, insane VO2 max. Like there's no arguing that. I've seen him do road rides. I've been there. I've witnessed him do the Cape Epic. So he's got anaerobic. That's what he focuses on. Now we've got a few newer school guys, which even you train, right? You've got Ocean O'Callaghan. You've got Ethan that's coming back from injury. You've done Adam Brayton saying like it's the best he's felt at the bottom of Fort William. Now it's anecdotal, but surely that means something. So who in the modern day crop, obviously your guys, and who else are you seeing? Like, I think they're focusing on strength and condition more than most. Like, what do you think Amory's doing? What do you think Loic's doing? Like those body types, the way they're riding. Like, let's spitball a bit.
I think they play it down. They maybe don't want to show people exactly what they're doing because they're so competitive. The shame of say Ethan, let's say, being on the program, following the program that you can buy on the app and follow it at the same time as Ethan, who came second at a World Cup. He's followed that with no specialist training or advice for a number of years, 4 or 5 years solidly. And he'll hop back on the program when there's, say, a block of racing and then a time in between. He'll just go straight back onto the same program on that day and continue it. He is more than capable of getting to the bottom of a downhill run, not gassed, not fatigued, able to focus and perform really well. He does not do, let's reframe that in a second. He has not done zone training. He's only just done a VO2 max test. So we didn't know what that was, how to increase it. And ultimately, he's like mid-range. So to suggest that people are winning World Cups with mid-range VO2 max, would that suggest if you increase it, would they do better? Well, no, because we've just eliminated the fitness so they can get down there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's controversial, right? That's because you could argue incremental gains, right? But how much, I guess what we're going to come back to is how much time and effort to get how much incremental gain. I mean, that's kind of the question here that we're going to keep coming back to.
Yeah, and this is the point, because the marginal gains, Team Sky, road cycling, everything was, will this increase or decrease performance to the point where they're taking mattresses to accommodation so people sleep better? I get that, because you're an engine on a bike. Now, the psychology of a downhill racer is different. It's better to go into a race feeling like they're completely physically prepared, and then it comes down to the psychology after that. So when we're talking about incremental gains, you can spin all plates together, but if you focus too hard on an area that ultimately doesn't get any return, say VO2 max, you get to a threshold where it takes a lot more effort to go up a little bit, diminishing returns on your effort.
I mean, that's such a big statement on the VO2, right? What could you unpack that a little bit? Like how much time and effort it would take to move the needle there?
Yeah. So ultimately, the higher you go, the more time it takes to get any better. If you're starting on any kind of fitness journey, anything you do will help you. And your body, we call it a training age. So the longer you've been training, particularly with strength work, the harder it is then to get more strength. And this is where I got with CrossFit. I spent a good 3 or 4 months on a squat specific program to get stronger. And I put 5 kilos on my squat and I was squatting 185 kilos, which isn't big in the CrossFit world. And at that point, I thought that was not worth it. All of the effort I put in, everything I did right, I got 5 fucking kilos. In that time, I could have been doing anything else and enjoying myself pain-free because it was a painful process. So when we're looking at VO2 max, ultimately, if you're around 55 to 65 on your VO2 max, like you are in the bracket of elite athletes that are racing downhill. Anything above that, diminished returns. You're going to have to spend a lot more time on zone-specific training to increase it. And when we're talking about zone 2, it takes a long time. When we're talking about intervals, that's high fatigue. That energy and that time would be much better spent on the bike, practicing, enjoying your sport, even hanging out social rides. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you are obviously a proponent of strength conditioning training. It's your business, it's your life. You've got these athletes, but you've come back to say like skill-based sport, and once you're at a certain level, let's not forget the bike time and all. And I think that's awesome because I was hearing Tomac speak about it on in between races and how much bike time they actually need. Like if you've got practice and you've got qualifying and then a main, he's kind of alluding, he didn't want to say it, but he's kind of alluding to like, I think everyone's riding too much in the week. So his skill is already, like it's Eli Tomac, right? It's Loic Bruni. At a certain stage in the season, less bike time is okay as well. Then you maybe go back to the block of strength and conditioning because that's lapsed a bit. And I think if we're all really better at not looking outside and really focusing, like you've said, what is your strength and conditioning deficiency? What's your VO2 max deficiency skill? And then if you get those all together, then we haven't even touched on the mental side, right? The psychology of the sport, which is, how long is a piece of string, to really quantify that. So it's interesting you say that. Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing out that because it is just, again, we'll say it a million times, skill-based, skills-based sport.
So many more downhill riders, enduro riders would benefit from a mental coach, a mental performance coach, to get them to frame everything well so that then they're in a repeatable state of mind, which is a high performance zone state, let's say. Some people can't get that. So why would you not spend the time there versus, it's not even a lot of time. You meet with someone once a week, they give you strategies, and all it is thought. It doesn't take any physical energy. So why would you not do that? And this is a shame that I see people not going down that path. And the people that I spoke to that have had a mental coach, not one of them said it wasn't worth it. I know Greg Minnaar said that it was suggested to him and he said no, but maybe he's one of those unique characters that he understands himself to the depths of his motivations and anxieties enough. But of course, because he's competed for so long, but even Michael Jordan, he had a mental coach that progressed him on. Why would you not, even at the top of your sport?
Yeah, I agree. I think Greg is an outlier in the fact that I don't know what the chemical names are and how it all works, and I'll butcher, but I think he needs high pressure to perform his best, and it's been proven time and time again. So for him, other athletes battle a little bit more under these bigger moments, bigger pressure, and that's where they need someone in their corner to just maybe help them with facts, help them with self-talk, whatever it may be. Loic's spoken about it. He does chat to someone. It's now become, I would guess, it becomes almost life coaching as well, right? They might, depends on the week what they speak about. There might be some external stuff away from the bike that they need to handle so that it's not weighing on them at a race. So
100%.
I'm a proponent of that. I definitely spoke to someone at the Sports Institute here, and it was very helpful. And I think training, depending on the athlete, that's why I outsourced my training. I didn't want to have any doubt. I've used a few trainers, Alan Milway being one of them, some local guys, Scott Sharples back in the day. Very thankful to everyone that was in my corner, because that's what it was. It was like, what's the program? I'll do it, and I'll just go to bed. I did my work. And I think that builds confidence as well. Like real strong, not deluded confidence. You get confidence from doing the work,
So me as a business person, this is why I outsourced the development of the app, because I wasn't about to learn how to develop an app. So I got enough information to trust the people to do it, to then give it to them. Same with training. And this is how I find myself with the handful of elite athletes that I train them out of choice. So ultimately, my income comes from the general population program that I put out, from the things that I learn from the elite athletes. But that means that I can choose now who I train, and the fulfillment that gives me is immense. So that's my enjoyment there. And building the relationships with those people. Some people just want to follow a program and be completely ignorant to the background of why they're doing it, because they just trust me, and then they're committed, and that's what they need on race day, to know that they've done everything prior, not question it. Other people need to understand more, and I find that balance in these relationships. At what level do I explain how we're doing things, what data we're collecting, and how that reflects on the training, ultimately for buy-in? Because when we're talking about things like VO2 max testing, is it necessary? No, because we've proven that it's not. But does it help some people
Jamie's
sometimes?
Not happy hearing that.
No, it's not.
and that's why it pushes us all to think outside the box, right?
Yeah, but here's the defining factor on my stance on that is, you can do the best testing and find out everything about yourself. That's on that day. It changes thereafter. So it's variable thereafter. Zone training, all the finite detail, fantastic. If everything else is nailed down, you have a psychologist, you have a nutritionist, you're sleeping 9 hours of quality sleep a night, you're doing all of your mobility, and everything else is nailed down. But ultimately, this is the key point. Even when the data comes in to suggest that this particular VO2 max is optimal, let's strive for it, this is the training to maximize your progression to it. Say you've got a month's worth of training and you've got 20 days of training. Who is going to do 20 days? The very elite athletes. So for everybody else, and even some people that are going to be winning World Cups, it's better for me to get the balance so that they get the buy-in and the frequency of training, regardless of how perfect it is or not. Because who's going to perform better? The person that trains 20 days a month, or the person that does 12 to 15 days of perfect training? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's like, if there's going to be data there in the future, yes, we have a perfect pathway. But we're talking about people. Nothing's ever perfect. Nothing's ever aligned for long enough to be on that perfect pathway. So how do we actually maximize the training frequency, the number of training days? And on those days, what do you do depending on how you feel and what you're physically and mentally capable of? And throwing in the other variable, how does that actually support your psychology around racing mountain bikes? Because when this becomes a job, and your mountain bike passion diminishes, that's when we see performance go downhill massively. Because people get to an event and have committed so much to the training, they expect results. But their mind is different from when they started mountain biking. So their state of mind come race day is different. And it's unusual to them because they haven't been doing the social rides, the enjoyment, the 15 laps that Oshin does on a weekend that everyone's like, oh, it's too many. You know, like him and Ronan together, they're lapping.
I had a few runs with Ronan out here, and I could generally see how much he loves riding his bike, and it's different to how other guys prepare, and that's great.
Yeah, and that's where we hear so much with the top level athletes. I have to enjoy it. So, what part of riding your bike versus the balance of training and everything else allows you to enjoy it? Do you know what I mean? Like some things you're not going to enjoy, but
let's break that down a bit, because there's also the other school of thought, like if it's not fun, I can't perform, and people use that as a scapegoat.
Yeah, I've come across that massively. Yeah. So they're the people that train 12 to 15 days instead of 20, because then they're like, it's not fun for me anymore. I used to train for 6 months and hate every session, because the most fun I would have is on event day, knowing that I did my best prior to it. You don't have to enjoy yourself every moment, but you have to enjoy the whole process and the package of finishing that on the defined day of competition and reflecting back and say, yes, I did enjoy it. Do you know what I mean?
But what about a guy that is in that camp of like, it's not fun, so I'm not going to ride my best, and you can see the work ethic slipping a bit? Like, how do you then re-energize that person?
Well, we take time out. We take a massive shift in what parts of it are not fun. Is it the work? Is it the volume? Are you tired all the time? And then you shift it somewhere else. Go bouldering, surfing, road cycling.
Yeah.
You know, we're not dropping off on the level. And this is what I found with some athlete is that they've told me, I want to do nothing after a World Cup and I don't want to train until January. Like, right, okay. Right. Are you really an athlete then? Because ultimately, every other sport, even the athletes that have their off season, are active doing other things. Cross training, I guess. So then that time you're going backwards, that you have to build up after Christmas. So then you're basically at the same point you were when you left off. Whereas the other people, so enjoyment, say, so Henry Kiefer, junior world champion, he takes a lot of my time because I see his potential, and he's one of the guys that I like to educate so he understands fully. So when he's 35 and still racing, he can be a Greg Minnaar because he fully understands himself and the process, and he's committed to it. He wanted to run a marathon before Christmas, and I didn't want to take that away from him. Everyone else was saying, no, it's a stupid idea. I thought, you know what? Let him experience that process of a different sport. He wants to challenge himself. He'll learn a lot about himself. And then even before the marathon date, it's like, no, this was a bad decision. So you got to allow people to make some bad decisions, but ultimately it was still activity that in the realms of VO2 max, that would still increase his VO2 max, like base training, just running instead of cycling, which probably didn't help him on the bike, but it helped him massively with the commitment to the training specifically after it. Because he had that shift in where his focus was to realign with where he really wants to be. And happiness and enjoyment comes from when you're confident in the things that you're doing because of your underlying passion and fundamentally the reason why you got into the sport. And I feel like when people get fulfillment from their performance and they're happy with how they did versus other people, that enjoyment just becomes not a peak of thrill or excitement or immediate stimulation. It's a sense of fulfillment and well-being that is leveled. Like Minnaar, you could probably say Minnaar, you know, is he that up? Is he that down? He's conditioned himself to be unaffected because the psychology is so important to be consistent. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you said an interesting thing there, like people that need to take time off and things like that. And Greg and I were probably in that camp because we were away from home so much, and we needed time away. And then another thing you mentioned, which happens in all walks of life, is like you start training, and maybe the listener, and I want to ask a question about that afterwards, but you get this expectation because you're doing the work. Your expectations rise of your results, and if your results don't match, that's basically defining unhappiness, right? Same in all walks of life. If you raise your expectations and reality don't match your expectations, which could not be fact, you are unhappy. And then it probably becomes a grind, and that can happen with athletes, I guess. So, how do you help the everyday rider as well as the elite on managing those expectations when they're putting all this work in and they're working on these deficiencies?
It's so different between everyday riders and
I thought
pros
you might
because
say that.
because pros, there's the other variable of this is my job. If I don't perform, I won't have a job. I'm going to have to go back working 9 till 5 if I don't do well. And that's really difficult to frame enjoyment with that kind of pressure. And you see I imagine that the Brunies and the people out there would be doing something to that degree of intensity and commitment regardless. So they get the enjoyment not necessarily because it's their job, but because they have that competitive athlete mindset and it's just in them. You can learn that through whatever you did as a child, through development, and you can become that athletic, competitive mind. Other people, they're really good on the bike and they find themselves with a sponsorship and they not necessarily have been exposed to that kind of pressure before. So then they're on the world stage with pressure that they've never felt and been able to deal with. And that's why a psychologist is really important for those people, because they haven't had the time to learn, and then it does affect their performance. For the everyday rider, then you've got to understand that most people can only ride at weekends, particularly, when it's wintertime in the UK, North America, Europe, time is short. So when you're working full time, even when you have a family, what time can you commit to it? And that's why, like this program, the one that we sell to the general population, people that can't ride their bike for skill, but already go to the gym and have a desire to increase their fitness, fuck me, get to an 80 VO2 max, deadlift 250 and squat 200 and do Fran in 2 minutes, be as well, as athletic as you possibly can be, because that's the only thing you can do then. When you get an hour a day through the week, then when you're on the bike, it makes a massive difference. But when any element of that is minimized by basically your commitments elsewhere, it's fine to have a favorite and somewhere that you commit. But always know that, like we said earlier, diminished returns. So you can go as fit as you like, but it only helps so much on the bike without that bike time. What was the initial question? What was the...
No. You handled that well. The amateurs potentially raising their expectations, but you've helped us understand the professional. But I think on the amateur side, like, be honest with how much time you have, and I'll answer some of it for you, and be honest with your goals and be realistic. I have the same, like when I try hit this white ball around, people have heard it enough with golf, and I've had a little one. So it's like,
oh, may I try golf for a while?
Yeah. So, but I had to go back and I was like, okay, so if I went on my downhill bike and I hadn't ridden in 2 months, which I did with Ronan, I had to physically tell myself, do not do anything stupid or try keep up, which I managed to still have a crash, but it wasn't from trying to keep up. It was just an unlucky, probably a little bit rusty, but I had already told myself, like, if you expect in the sport that you're very good at to not be on the top of your game because you're rusty, then how do you expect to hit the stupid white ball around if you're not putting as much time in as you used to? And I think maybe some of the listeners can probably listen to that a bit. It's like some of them really want to do well on a weekend race, or they've got this enduro they're going to go and ride. It's like, but just be honest, how much prep did you do because of the time constraints? And maybe you
Exactly.
can help them with that. But I think lowering expectations is also healthy, and being realistic with them. It's very healthy for your happiness of like, why are you going to the race? To have fun with your buddies, to get a result, fine. Just be careful if it's for a result. You're going to be disappointed most of the time, you know?
But look at the times when people have won after breaking a chain at the top, because immediately expectations are lowered. There's no pressure because there's then a get-out clause. If you don't perform, you're like, well, I broke my chain. What do you expect? So then everything becomes free and flow state. Because
I think that's why Troy won Mount St. Anne, you know, after having a kid. He was euphoric from that and no expectations. He probably didn't sleep
no
as
expectations.
Well. And so it was probably low expectations.
Because ultimately, when you're going downhill, whether amateur or pro, the amount of noise outside of what you're doing at the time adds distraction and reduces your performance. So if that noise comes from, I had an argument with my wife before I came, tension, distraction. If that noise comes from, fuck me, I'm so gassed, or I'm unfit, I'm not able to hold on to my bike, performance goes down. It's not necessarily the physical change in you, it's how distracted your mind is from the commitment of your skill. Basically, performing at the highest level that your skill is at that time. So when expectations are immediately removed for, say, pro riders with a broken chain, then everything else becomes, I'm riding my bike now, because I don't have to justify anything that happens regardless of the result. So then it's a finer focus on the task at hand. And that's what everyone talks about, the flow state, is removing all noise. And you'll know yourself
it's the holy grail. No, that's what at the minute as you described that, I'm like, that's easier said than done. And most things are, right? That's the holy grail, is lower all expectations after you've got a contract expiring in 2 months and you've had 3 flat tires in a season, you've crashed at the next race and you've got 3 races left. Pretty hard to lower all expectations because you know what you've got to go and do, you know?
But then for everyday riders, I've gone out for a ride with high expectations because I feel fresh, ready, free of mind, and I get there and I perform really badly on the first little section of a downhill. I'm like, shit, I was supposed to be enjoying this and I'm not. And thereafter, the noise increases. Do you know what I mean? And other times,
definitely.
I go out, I'm like, I feel rough, not really up for this. And you hit the first few corners, like, wow, yeah. And then the noise is reduced.
You've basically described like a planned night out versus a spur of a moment night out.
Yeah,
which one's better?
Yeah, totally agree.
Right?
Yeah.
And what can, and I'm an everyday rider now, what can an everyday rider learn from these pros and their training? Like the first word that comes to mind is maybe consistency.
Yeah.
Like they're just doing
100%.
They're just doing it day in, day out. So
you've heard the 10,000 hours thing,
I know it well.
You can't spend 10,000 hours riding downhill. So as much as you can towards that, yes. And then ultimately think about the reasons you're doing it. And like you said, if you spend 6 months of training really high, does that increase your expectations of a race? And therefore you don't meet those expectations, therefore you don't enjoy yourself. So those 6 months to project yourself into the future, I'm going to enjoy myself when I perform well. Are those 6 months worth it when you don't? Because you've already risen the bar as well. So instead, why don't you not train? Why don't you go bouldering, fell running, road cycling? Don't do anything specific. Do things that are active that make you move well. do Pilates and yoga, whatever. Join a CrossFit class. Do a high rocks. Do those things that you're getting fulfillment, but also some element of fitness and progression. And then keep the riding to, I do this because I love it.
Mm.
If raising your performance because you've got deficits on the bike that stop you loving it, fill them in so that then when you do go on your bike, you get a chance to enjoy it.
And I would add, because I'm sure there are riders listening and people listening that do have goals, that do want to improve their riding. They've got a competitive mindset, probably high achievers at work, high achievers on the bike.
99% of the people on the program.
Yeah. And what I would say to them is like, okay, the expectations may rise or your goals are there, but don't let the one race define you. That would be like me letting 2 crashes define my season or my career. It's like, okay, when I pack it up at the end of my career, am I satisfied, And I think they should have maybe longer timelines for the expectation, because you're going to do all this work and you might see an improvement at the very next race, but you might not because of all the factors you've mentioned here.
Yeah.
It's so many variables in downhill, right? From any sport having a lot of variables, but I think downhill has like an incredible amount, Every track's different. Conditions can be different. The mental side, the conditioning, all those things. So I would almost ask them to stretch out their expectations and goals, and like maybe at the end of the season say, okay, did I have close enough results to some of my goals, and why? What got in the way? And I think that's maybe a healthier way to look at it.
Yeah. Let's say you can set goals, which ultimately is an expectation. So you go to a race and you say, I want to be in the top 25%. You can't change or define how other people ride. So you might be in a group of, everyone racing that day could be way better than the year before you did that same race. Or you have a group of 6 guys that you ride with and you train hard so that then you can be as quick as the second quickest guy. You're like, one day I might catch that guy, but for now, I'd be happy if I beat him. If he's done nothing and not been on his bike, and then, to tell you a funny story about, do you believe much in manifestation and visualizing, projecting yourself in the future? So Elliot,
definitely visualization for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, visualizing like track and whatnot, but actually asking the universe what you want and manifesting it.
I believe in it. Here's what I'll do. I believe in it if you put the work and the process in towards that goal. Yes. I don't believe in sitting in your bed and lying on the one side and going, I'm going to manifest a life partner. Well, you got to go out and meet the life partner and put the work in.
Yeah. I think
you've heard the secret, right? The secret is good, but I think what people miss is the work. You've got to go put the effort in. How are those New Year's resolutions going? If you've fallen off track, I get it. But one habit I've stuck with is AG1. 1 scoop once a day, and I know I'm covered with 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients. It's the easiest way to support my immune health, digestion, and energy. For some of you, winter mornings can be rough. I get it. But AG1 helps me wake up, get moving, and stay focused, even when I'd honestly rather hit the snooze button. It takes 60 seconds to mix and drink, but the benefits last all day. Wellness isn't a solo journey. So many friends, family, and listeners like you have made AG1 a daily habit. And with Valentine's Day coming up, why not commit to your health with your partner? Studies show that forming habits together makes them stick. Best of all, there's a 90-day money-back guarantee. So if you're skeptical or not sure, you can just buy and try it for 3 full months. And if you don't like it for any reason, they'll give you your money back. It's never too late to start a new healthy habit. And AG1 is offering new subscribers a free $76 gift, including a welcome kit, a bottle of D3K2, and 5 free travel packs. Head over to drinkag1.com/moving the needle to get this offer and start your year on a healthier note. That's drinkag1.com/moving the needle.
So when I was training Elliot Heap, and he was on the Nuke Proof team or chain reaction team with Sam Hill. And so we sat and I've done enough research and self-development to understand psychology of sport and being in competitive environments in other sports. But ultimately, I suggested that I'd basically record me in his self-talk words. Does that make sense? So basically, he told me the things that drive him, what he wants to achieve, and the things that are holding him back, reframing it into, say, I ride smooth and confidently. I'm always calm and collected before I drop in. And one of those things was, I am faster than Sam Hill. I can beat Sam Hill. Sam Hill is not unbeatable. And this is when he was unbeatable in enduro, and he was his teammate. And he came back in after doing the manifestation and the visualization and everything. And Elliot didn't necessarily perform any better, but Sam performed really shit. I was like, fuck, mate. I didn't realize that by asking the universe those things, we should have really defined that we didn't want to make him shit. We wanted to make you better.
Yeah. You're like, whoops, lost in translation.
Sorry.
That's a great story, man.
So we joked about it. Ultimately, I don't believe that we asked the universe and it made Sam shit. No. But it means, like, when you set your expectation of something there, was Elliot really that happy? No. He wanted to beat number one. So what we should have done is we were not having Sam Hill as the thing that's in his ear, but that was like obviously his biggest worry and stress at the time. It was whoever's number one. It can be me. I deserve to be top of the podium on my day. Do you know what I mean? It's like you can't control other people unless you really believe in the universe.
I don't know. I think I need to come do some manifestation with you. It seems like you're able to control certain things. But speaking of control and not control, I think we glossed over, but I would add that, okay, so you're going to a race with your buddies and you want to be second of the pack, or you want to be in the top 25. Like, that's a goal, right? And you can write it down and you can park it. But I think what the pros do better, and jump in if you will, is they set process-orientated goals along the way to achieve the bigger goal. So to be the top 25% or to be a world champion, you break it down. Okay, I've got to train in the off-season. I've got to do bike testing. I've got to stay motivated. I got to do all these little things. And at a race, it's okay, I've got to track walk. I've got to prepare. Like, you're not jumping ahead to the results-driven goal. It's the process.
Yeah.
How do I perform at my best? And that's staying in the moment and doing, say, okay, you've done all the work. You've trained a bit. You've downloaded this app and you're doing your strength condition. Like, okay, I'm going to get a podium at my local race. Okay, but isn't a better goal to say, I'm going to have as much fun as possible during training, and I'm going to experiment with lines for the first 3 runs. Then I'm going to stick to my lines for the week, because then I'm going to have less doubt, and then I'm going to do my race run. Like, process orientated, I think could help a lot of people.
So the manifestation is ultimately, that's how you're going to feel on the day. So you visualize your future and you're comfortable with it. And this is why business people do it. When they visualize themselves driving a car, living in a house, having a lifestyle. Because the more you tell yourself that, your mind can't differentiate between the imagination and reality. So the more you create those neural pathways, the more of a reality it becomes with less barrier, because subconsciously your mind believes it's happened. So on race day, if you believe that you're capable of winning, you believe that you're quiet, confident, smooth, you take features, you don't get scared, all of those things. If you keep telling yourself that, on race day, you've already been there. It's not like the visualization of how you're riding a track. It's the visualization of how you're feeling while you're doing it. That's the end goal. That's basically, you see, where do you want to be? You visualize that. And then there's something that I call dreamlining. I don't know if anyone else called it that, but since doing all of the Tony Robbins shit and the self-development, dreamlining for me is you have that, you manifest it so it can become a reality. And it's not like you say, right, I'm going to live in a 20-bedroom mansion with a swimming pool underground. You can't, at that time, you feel like a fraud. You're like, that can't happen. You tell yourself that so many times, then the barriers break down, and then it is a possibility to you. But what has to happen is that you then dreamline from that end result everywhere back. So to win confidently, track walk, I'm going to feel like this. When I see Bruni, he's not going to scare me. I'm going to be confident in the pack that are walking down. I'm going to be free, have a bit of banter. That's the mentality. Before that, it's that I'm going to, like you say, in practice, do these things all the way back to what am I going to do right now after this conversation, after feeling it? Well, I'm going to get in the gym tomorrow because I know I need to train. Not defer it for 3 weeks to wait for the perfect training program. Tomorrow morning, I don't know what to do. I'm going to go for a 5K run just to see where I'm at with my fitness. Just do something. At least you can visualize then an actionable thing to do the very next day. Everything in between, you need to also visualize those things. And like Michael Phelps, the swimmer, visualized how it would be on race day if he lost his goggles when he went in. People don't normally visualize failure.
Yeah, well,
but you visualize how he would deal with
for
it.
the worst. Yeah. You could plan all scenarios. It's actually budgeting for all scenarios there, right?
Exactly. So you, within that dreamlining, it's not necessarily a defined path, but branches within it of possibilities.
Yeah.
And you go where the traction is most to get you towards that goal. Do you know what I mean?
No, it's really well defined. And what comes to mind is like everyone has a plan till they get punched in the face. So
Yes.
if you had a good mental coach, he might say, okay, what if practice doesn't go well in the morning of world champs?
Yeah.
You could get a flat and you could miss your second run. Okay, so that's not the best preparation, but if you've budgeted that could be a scenario. How do you deal with it?
Because
I've
if you
had some of my
define it,
worst practice sessions and I just got on the trainer and I got out and I was like, and I think what elite athletes are good at is just like accepting what they can't control and putting it behind them. And then they go up
golf.
to the top of the run. Hey?
Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
Best mental game, leaving whatever shot he did before is irrelevant. Whatever happened before that shot,
it is a good game
shot.
to teach you for all walks of life and all sport. Yeah, it's like every day you go out and play this silly game. Everyone laughs at me talking about it, but that is like a condensed version of all those things.
I used to be a competitive archer, bow and arrow archer.
Yeah.
Same thing. You make it or lose it.
That's pretty similar to golf, right? It's like that process
and weightlifting,
and you're in your head.
Yeah. Performing a snatch. You like from the ground, lifting a bar over your head, Olympic lift. You make it or don't make it before it happens. Everything's a visualization, like a golf swing. You make it or don't make it. There's no surprises really when you're mid-swing. You know, it's happened already. But then, like golf, you have a number of shots. If you allow the weight of whatever happened before carry on to the next one, then you get into that downward cycle chasing losses, and that's a bad state of mind, a non-professional athlete state of mind. So I guess for like everyday riders, like I was explaining earlier, I've gone out with high expectations and it's ruined my ride for the full day. If I was better at reframing it, going back around and not raising my expectations again to, let's say, make up my losses, it's instead reframing it to a completely new ride. If I could leave that behind me, like say you do an enduro race and your first stage is really bad, why should that then affect the other one? It's happened and gone. This is the psychology of it in a skills-based sport, because that determines your result much higher degree than, unless you're super unfit and you literally can't get around an enduro course within the time. Like that's what we were talking about earlier, about having that minimum standard of fitness, but then having a peak where it's diminished returns. If you're in that bracket, then you're down to the psychology and skill of it, where most of your performance is defined by your mental state versus your physical state. And obviously there's crossover. You know, if you feel crap, your mind might be crap. But yeah, like where's the balance, eh?
Yeah, it's super interesting because if you actually solve all those things, then do we go to the bucket of mental? Is like that's what differentiates us. Like if the VO2 max is enough, Jamie's happy, strength conditioning is enough, you're happy, the riding is decent enough, then what's separating these top guys?
How they feel on the day, what mental preparation that they've done.
Or how
The
they deal with
closest,
maybe how they deal with how they feel on the day.
yeah. But I know Ethan has a mental coach, and I'm going to be speaking to him next week and dissecting that on that high level. I am a performance coach mentally for potential World Cup winners. What does that process look like? And I'm pretty sure by dissecting that, we'll understand more. I mean, I stopped reading business and self-help books and even sports coaching books after every book I picked up was regurgitating the same principles. If you read the 7 Habits of Extremely Successful People, within that and understanding yourself, you probably can define then the things that you struggle with mentally on a performance level, like fulfillment and all of the things that you need as a human being to be able to be in a state that is high performance. Do you know what I mean? Like you can put so much effort in. And I guess this is why I went back into mountain biking, because CrossFit competition was all about effort. Like the harder I go, the better I am. Mountain biking, if I push too hard, it's not good for my performance. Like I can't
Or your
make
body
up
if you hit the ground.
well, yeah, exactly. I can't make up my lack of skill by trying harder. I got to relax, follow the process, tone it down more with less intensity and practice that, you know? So this is like the difference between a performance sport and a skills-based sport. What actually allows you to perform? And that's not hitting full maximum physical effort. It's being in a state where that physical effort doesn't determine you because it's not high enough. And then allowing you to be in that state of high performance where it's flow state, or let's just say a state that you've been in that is relaxed and you're able to perform your best because of the lack of tension, expectations, etc. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I wanted to pick your brain. You said you've had the opportunity to work for a team, and it got to the point
Yeah.
that you thought maybe you could give the athletes better service if you stayed individual with them. Are you able to talk a bit to that? Like that's, to me, that's very fascinating because it'll tie into a segue of like the current downhill format. And I know you've got some thoughts on that and how that's going to bring more pressure and different coaching, which is going to be really cool to unpack with you.
Yeah, so I worked as a performance manager for a factory team, and I was approached because I already had a partnership on social media stuff. You can probably guess who it is if you follow me. But ultimately, I was already training one of their athletes, and I came in, and 5 athletes on the table. And I don't know, I need to kind of go back to the start. I didn't take it as a job. I met with the founder of the company and the head of marketing, and I said, I don't want a job. I want to be part of a process that is framing performance in the right way to make a massive change in the industry. Because of the principles that I believe and have seen on a practical level, let's do these things to raise the bar of what it is to be a high-performing downhill and enduro athlete. And what I discovered was shortly after my 2-year contract, a few months in, lots of the performance was lost on things like getting to bed on time, waiting around for mechanics, the logistics, location of accommodation, and all of the things that are what I call on a macro scale. And I found myself in a job where I was having to justify individuals' performance on metrics that the people I was giving those metrics to didn't understand. So what they wanted to see, and I boiled it down after a few months, like, right, what is it you want from me? Do you want a spreadsheet of this athlete said he would do 140 deadlift by April, and along the way, you want red crosses and green ticks? And he said, yes, I want exactly that. I was like, fuck me. My job would be so easy then. I can increase all of those, but they're going to be shit on the bike. Like, as a performance coach, it's not about raising people's physical ability. It's having them perform at the top level the best they can. And sometimes that means they're not training 20 days a month. They're training 10, because that's what they need to get the enjoyment back and the reason they're doing it, so they perform. Ultimately, that would be detrimental to what they wanted me to do. So then in the end, I was making no progress on the logistical side of the team, on strategic levels that would help performance on a different scale. I'm like, look, what I'm doing is small fry. They're going to do that anyway. The things that are going wrong here are big. You need to sort this shit out. And initially, when they said they want it to be a performance-led team, I put myself at the top to sign off decisions from the team manager and everyone underneath, not necessarily make the decisions, but question. They said, we need an underlying fundamental principle. Number one, does this decision increase the possibility of performance or decrease it? So when you're looking at, say, logistics, where's the accommodation? Is being 15 miles away going to increase or decrease the possibility of performance, or being on site? Pros and cons. Noise, stress. So maybe the best performance accommodation is half a mile away. Out of the crowd, quiet enough, but super easy to get to. The accommodation's 15 miles away. That meant nothing. I was like, what made you make that decision? Because it certainly wasn't performance. And so ultimately, in the end, because I couldn't make change on that level, after our 1 year review, we basically had a mutual agreement that I wouldn't be working as the team performance manager. But of the 5 athletes, I kept 4 of them independently. And I'm guessing that the one that I didn't keep, we just didn't gel on a personal level. So I couldn't be their coach, which is fine, because obviously personalities have to align. Not necessarily the things, but how you gel with somebody. And those 4 athletes then went on to perform well. And they're still with me as I am their coach, because I was invested in them. I suggested at the end of that 1 year, pay me a quarter of what you were paying me, and I'll be responsible for the athlete's performance, but only answerable to them. I don't want meetings talking about shit that I can't change. I don't even want to know the shit that I can't change, because it frustrates me. I didn't sign up to this role to see everything falling off and me doing the best job for the athletes. And I think they found the stress in me being the person that the athletes talk to. And they said to me, Jonny, it's a problem that everyone's coming to you with their issues. Like, because I'm the only one that takes them seriously and understands that it can be detrimental to their performance. You're not treating them as athletes. You're treating them as a marketing tool. I'm not even sure whether you're bothered about a result. If your bike's and it looks steezy and the media's good, you're like, you can't have both. You can't have a winning performance-led team and also be taking people out like the day before practice on a stupid media trip. I understand that these things have to work in the industry, but there's different ways to do it. And as a performance coach, I just hated the fact that I could make no change to a historic culture. I couldn't change the culture within the team on the higher levels, basically. I got myself in trouble as well because I dropped people in it when I made no change. Like, I know by sending this email, I'm not going to be working here again. But I have to send the email because I can't just sit. And I've made myself a promise after leaving employment. I'm not just going to be paid for my time. without additional fulfillment and progress, actually feeling like I'm making change. So I sent the email, these are all the things wrong, I've tried really hard and there's no change. And then the person that obviously makes the decisions was copied in, and he didn't speak to me again until we parted ways.
Yeah, it's not easy, but I commend you because you've got a backbone. Like you've got a backbone on your view on strength and conditioning, and
Yeah.
you've got a backbone on like, okay, you've hired me to be performance. I can keep getting a paycheck and massage some of these issues, or I can just say it how it is. And
Yeah.
I hear you. I mean, there were times where I think you've mentioned like you can't box every athlete into the same box. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
You can't have prima donnas on a team, but you also can't
for
just
example,
box them all into the one style.
For example, Oshin, there was lots of criticism. So he shouldn't be riding with Ronan. He's dangerous. He's going to kill himself. He shouldn't be doing 15 laps. Like, he shouldn't be doing all these laps and laps and laps. Like, he's conditioned. This is what he needs. And then reframing it, the other person, who I won't name, he needs to be more like them, in the gym all of the time, speaking the language of a performance athlete. Who performed best? Best, worst, right? So ultimately, the person that was doing as I told them in the gym, etc., speaking that language, maybe not being completely honest with what they needed to perform high, didn't perform as well as Oshin, who still had a grasp of the reason why he was doing it and the enjoyment and freedom. Having that freedom to make decisions himself and not be defined by what expectations the team have of him. He knows his path. He's one of the most professional athletes that I've ever met. And the way that he approaches things and deals with things, stress in the pits, etc., he can push it off. All the noise around him, he's used to it now. He's had some shit situations where it's conditioned him to reduce the noise so he can do what he does with confidence. So there's a difference there.
He's done super well, right? Like there was quite a lot of expectations on his shoulders, and he had quite a few trying years, right, before this breakout win where I wonder if people wrote him off. Like like looking back, like it must have been pretty tough for him because of his skill, of winning at an early age, and like there were quite a few years there which he had some tough breaks.
There was the team environment wasn't amazing for a couple of years. There was a couple of injuries, but ultimately he didn't expect to be winning those years. When we talk back about expectations,
he needed to grow into it. Yeah, totally. Okay.
And his dad Chris is amazing, as like he's more of his coach than I have ever been. I'll give them programs, etc., and have that relationship. But Chris is there managing him day to day, managing expectations, and it was always a building process. So when we're talking about coming from top 40 to 30 to 20 to top 10, it's not you're top 40 and on your day, some magic can happen and then you win. It's a process of development and growth that Oshin accepted and is fully comfortable with. That he can go out and be like, I'm fine with this result because it's part of the plan and the expectation that was defined 5 years ago. So I've worked with him since he was one of the first people to come to me in like 2016. He's like a junior rider. And he has the desire to win, yes, but he has the patience not to have urgency about it, to make bad decisions. So his growth is incremental, intelligent, but consistently upwards. Whereas other people, particularly when they're at the end of contract, they start doing things differently because they're like, right, I need to win this race, otherwise I'm screwed. They start doing things differently, and on balance, there might be 5% chance they might perform a little bit better because of that mindset. But there's a 95% chance they're going to perform worse. So when you're talking about a gamble like that versus following a process, the mindset is so different and the result also.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, man. That makes a lot of sense, and he has shown a lot of maturity. I'm not around him all the time, but it
Mm.
makes sense because that's what I could sense, and I've chatted to his dad a bunch. I need to have a chat to him on this podcast because yeah, they were out
Yeah,
here in
he's
South
such a
Africa,
cool
and
guy.
I like his attitude towards it, and I think with Andy joining that team, I think those two are going to get
Yeah,
on
that's
well. With
cool.
like they seem quite
Yeah.
carefree. They appreciate things. Like they don't feel rushed, like you say, with the results. So that's going to be really cool.
Oisin
And as we
thrives in an
maybe,
environment
yeah,
of people around him. So it wasn't he was pretty much on his own in a team where he was doing his things. But then with Ronan and other people, he doesn't need it, but he enjoys that. But having Andy on the team, then that's just going to allow them together to do the things. And logistically, it's easier to have that competitive yet uh, kind of team environment of growth. Do you know what I mean? Maybe someone a
yeah.
little bit more experienced, mature, sees things differently, but it's not rushed. There's no sense of urgency. It's just like the growth will be great.
No, I look forward to seeing that. Maybe as we start wrapping up, talk to me about the race format, and you kind of compared it to some other sports, and you think there's going to be interesting pressures that come with it and strategy. Like the sport has, it's still one man down a hill, but the courses are clearly getting a bit shorter within reason for TV. These formats,
Yeah.
they tried a different format and now they're going to another different format, which I think is closer to the original and how it should be. But you've only got X number in the final, 30 or whatever they're saying.
Yeah.
So yeah, speak to a little bit about that, those pressures and the performance
Well,
aspect and your
yeah,
thoughts on it.
I think it's great because I see that if you're a protected rider, then that pressure element is reduced, like we talked about earlier. So the psychology is changed for that person. Whereas
Yeah, it's
now
not a
it's
level
all on,
playing field. Yeah.
yeah. So everyone has that same pressure, that same on each of the stages to be able to perform at their highest level or not make it. And that's the way it should be because you can have that peace of mind if you've protected that then gives you an advantage. So it's when you get
Yeah,
into that,
yeah.
that's how we've seen in the past those guys at the top might not be floating at the top as much because they're brought down on the psychological level to having to perform each time, each race, and that puts on it that level playing field, which I think is a good move. It's less complicated for a viewer as well. And I don't know, maybe initially they thought that the top performing riders being protected will get more views. The people that follow more of the individual athletes. The way I see it also is that there's been a bit of a shift in maybe the way that they frame it. Keep hearing about F1 and teams. So maybe riders can float about, but ultimately it's about the team. And that's maybe how these factory teams, there might be a little bit of numbing down of individual personalities, which I've seen before. And it's all about like, how is the team doing? I don't know how that dynamic's going to change much about the sport or how it's viewed and received by people online and whoever's watching. But ultimately, I think there's a bigger investment then for teams to be putting in a more professional approach because ultimately their name is higher on the visibility level versus individual riders and people that, love a rider versus, a culture of a team. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. This is probably of the first time I'm speaking about it in 2025. We haven't done our review podcast or preview podcast and broken down the riders at all, or these changes. I've kind of just stayed out of it because, like you mentioned, depends what I can control is what I'm going to fight for, right? And I'm a spokesperson for the sport. I just want the best for the riders and the sport. So I think we've all got an opinion. It's tough to hide behind it, and biasly, I'm all for the new format because technically I mentioned LCQ a year or two before that. And I'm not claiming I'm the only person that thought of it. I'm just saying, like, I already spotted that there was not an even playing field if they are going to decrease the number in the final, which is not up to me. But if you're going to do that, I think there was a more level playing field and fairer way to do that, and that would be this LCQ or Q1, Q2. So all for that. I think that's a better way to do it, and that's exciting.
Yeah.
Yes, you've just mentioned an interesting thing. Like, what is the reason? They're clearly wanting to decrease the amount of people in the pits and teams because they can't get to certain venues. So I can understand, like, what's the red tape? You can't just shit on a decision without going, why did it come about? And everyone's going to have a different way of going about it. So yeah, they seemingly are pushing the teams forward, and that simplifies it for them. But maybe there's other reasons, like you say. Okay, if the teams start becoming established and we know they're there for 3 years when they earn that way, maybe the swear word in the room of outside industry sponsorship actually happens. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I thought it would have, we've been talking about it for 20 years. Let's hope it comes back. And maybe that gives the team an opportunity. I'm trying to be devil's advocate and open-minded as I start talking about these topics. And I do see where it's like with the point structure and now the riders being sort of rewarded for how well they did, and a person like Danny Hart being sought after because he's got points, and because he's Danny Hart, right? But I do think it's still an individual sport.
Yes,
Ronan has a terrible time and there's no points. He's still Ronan Dunn. Are you going to bet on him or not? So if you're a team and you can't get the points or you've kept points from someone else, I still think the proof's in the pudding. Like you still become a rider that can win a race or not.
And part of getting a team, there was a caveat in there about social media presence. If you have a team of super high influencers, regardless of results, then you might get an entry versus a high performing team that has like no one of note, let's say, that people don't really know. So there's a balance that I think that they're trying to find to get the most out of visibility and, I guess, developing into this team-based structure versus individuals, where maybe a team can run one rider one weekend and a different rider another weekend, collect the points, but not necessarily have the individuals fighting for like the overall. Do you know what I mean? Like who's the overall individual versus who's the overall team. And I think they're going to try and push that team up like the Constructors' Championship kind of thing. Do you know what I mean?
That could be something they're doing. I don't know how that works because we tune in for the individual. If Loic goes to a different team, then I know of the team. Like it's not football. It's not Chelsea. I'm not a Chelsea fan.
Yeah.
I'm a Loic Bruni fan. He won the race. Like Chelsea has a striker who I don't know who it is, and he scores a lot of goals. You can become his fan and you move to where he goes. He goes to Barcelona. You probably start watching Barcelona matches.
A little bit, but then your blood is Chelsea, isn't it? So
but your blood is Chelsea. We don't historically have that. So is that an attempt?
Our blood
to change
is downhill.
Culture? I don't know.
We just want downhill to be. Our blood is downhill.
We want downhill. We want fair racing, and we want entertainment.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got to see it play out, right? Like I mentioned, the riders mentioned they didn't like semifinals before it happened, and we tested it. And what's cool is they've adapted. Cool.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, which is good. Yeah.
We tried something new. Ultimately, you've got to start trying things as well to try increase visibility.
We are where we are, and it's just been difficult when Red Bull came off, then visibility goes down, and we can't reflect too much on that and be like, oh, it's so shit, because it's like leaving that behind.
Yeah.
The difficulty now comes in how many people are actually seeing to make it attractive to sponsor. Like, why would Porsche sponsor a downhill team versus a soapbox racer on Red Bull that probably gets more views of a weekend than a World Cup? Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, let's put Porsche on a fucking plywood buggy to go down and smash into some hay bales. Like, when we're talking about eyes on, then ultimately they get more visibility there. But what does it mean to be a named sponsor of a team? And this is what, because the change was happening, and this is what I wanted for YT. Sorry, I didn't say YT before then, but the YT team was to be a step ahead of it. So that then sponsors can look at a team that is making change making big impact in an industry of performance. And that means a lot for people like Wahoo. Wahoo are going to sponsor a team that are making big changes, making waves in the way that things are done. Not differently for different sake, but bringing it up to a level of other sports is not unusual. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then it's like, what does that team, how does that align with a sponsor, I guess? And having a more professional approach versus what a lot of outside the industry people will see as an extreme sport full of beer drinking, crazy people. It's then reframing it into, oh, this is an actual sport with athletes who are training all of their lives. They don't party hard anymore. They really look after their sleep. They're high level athletes and would perform well in any other sport. That's the kind of sponsorship that people, it opens more doors by reframing it that way.
Yeah, well said. No, I mean, you've been good about sharing that, even though you could take some slack, and that's what I really respect. Is, like I said before, just being able to speak your mind and back it up as well. So, yeah, I mean, this has been fascinating. We could go for hours. Like, is there something that we may have missed that you feel is important? Because I know you wanted to simplify training for people. You wanted to also maybe give them some motivation through these winter months. Like, stage is yours.
Well, I feel like we've been all over the place on the podcast with all kinds, particularly mental and skill-based things. But ultimately, for every rider, every level, like you say, have a goal, set that goal with reasonable expectations, dreamline it back. What do I need to do? And the person that has the highest commitment to consistency is most likely to get there, regardless of whether it's perfect or not. Have flexibility in the direction you go with the goal in mind. Go where the traction is. If you feel like you need to train 5 times a week, and one day, what's going to be better for you? Training on a day where you're fatigued and all your metrics are saying you should take a rest day, but you feel obliged to train, or taking time out and resetting your mind and doing something that is completely different. So find the balance between the enjoyment, but the commitment to the process of reaching your goal with reasonable expectations. Don't set off, if you're only riding once a week and you're doing nothing else, don't set off on training 6 days a week. Incremental increases, otherwise, because there's a difference between consistency and motivation. Motivation gets you going. That's the definition of the word. I can be motivated right now and excited by listening to me on a podcast. Yes, I'm going to go and fucking crush it. And then you go too far and the motivation weans and you haven't built consistency. Because building those habits, and I know people talk about is fucking, I'm sick of talking about habit building and shit. You know the strategies, fucking just consistently increase by a little bit each time instead of like crash dieting. Don't crash diet and then put all the weight back on and rebound. Consistently build in the frequency of training, regardless of how perfect it is. So don't allow yourself to procrastinate because it's not perfect. Consistency first, whatever you're doing. Go to a fucking CrossFit class, get moving, learn to move well, build up from 2 sessions to 3, spend more time on the bike, purposeful training, do the things that you don't enjoy, wet routes, that holds you back. Do more of them. Make it into a strength versus a weakness. So I guess like one really good piece of advice is find the one thing that you hate, but you know you hate it because you're not good at it. Commit to enjoying that because you are good at it. And honestly, I used to hate Olympic weightlifting because I was shit. Then it became my favorite thing to do because I committed to the process of improvement. I learned about it. And then because I was good at it, I enjoyed it. So from something that I hated to enjoyed, that can happen through consistently approaching it in a developmental fashion. Does that make sense?
That is an absolute nugget to end the show. It's so well said. I was just preached to me. I'm like, I'm listening to that. I'm thinking that's brilliant. That's so brilliant. Sometimes I need to hear that because I might take a couple of weeks off and I'll get to it in January. And then January slips by and I'm like,
Oh,
I've
it
got
needs to be
3
perfect.
months. Okay, I got 3 months till this project that I need to be fit for. Okay, I'll start. And then it's exactly hell for leather every day. I'm like, whoa. And I did it better this time. I only did an hour and a half on the first road ride and then half an hour run the second day. And I went to gym today and I was like, just some consistency. I'll
because you
up the
imagine.
load once I feel like it because you will. Here's one thing I'll add. I'm just like you guys listening. Once I get a little bit fitter, if I just don't overdo those first few crash dieting, you'll start wanting to do longer ones. So don't do the long one in the beginning.
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah, brilliant, man.
I did a High Rocks 2 weekends ago. I did it my first High Rocks because I met with Jono Jones at Fort William last year. He's like, Jonny, I need to get fit. I was like, fuck off, Jono. I've tried. You can't do it because you're not doing the perfect training that I'm giving you. Like, I give you the perfect training, but you're not doing it. I know. Let's sign up to a High Rocks because then it's completely independent.
Then he's
I'm
accountable
not in control.
as well.
You're accountable by your result at the end of it. Is it perfect for mountain biking? Absolutely not. But for whatever reason, my training wasn't committed to High Rocks until later when we definitely had a ticket, this and that. And I went in to training for High Rocks with the same volume and intensity as I had done strength and conditioning and riding, but I wasn't conditioned. So my calves absolutely blew up, which put me back, which meant I couldn't do the running that I needed to do well at High Rocks. So when you go in too hard, either physically or mentally, you're going to fuck yourself and you're not going to be able to follow the process. So
even Jonny Fit4Racing can get it wrong. So don't
I did it
feel
with flu.
shit.
I actually did it with like full-blown
Did you
flu
beat
as well.
Jono? Did you beat Jono?
No, I didn't.
What?
I know.
You're
well,
joking.
no. It's because
got
he spent years on
excuses
Fit4Racing.
Yeah, you've got an actual job.
No, he did really well. He knocked off like 15 minutes from his time.
Good for him.
We'll do it again because, ultimately I was sick when I did it. Like, I don't want to be that guy where I'm like, it wasn't me. It was because I was sick. But genuinely, I was absolutely dead.
Genuinely, you got issues. That's great. Man, this has been fascinating. So they must find you on Fit4Racing. That's the Instagram handle as well. Like, can they find all the links to that or what's the best for you?
Yeah. So on Instagram, Fit4, so number 4 Racing. We're on YouTube. We fired YouTube back up again so we can go into detail about things like VO2 max testing and how we're maybe going to reframe how we test. So it's not just sensors on the quads and it's not just VO2 max, but how you can define, say, a training zone within a conditioning piece versus pedal only. Do you know what I mean? Like, why would you be doing only training conditioning on a road bike where ultimately most of your energy is spent in your core and upper body on a downhill? So why aren't we doing zone training for 4 minutes on full body skier burpees and things like that? Do you know what I mean? So we're developing that.
I'm so glad I don't have to train anymore to that level. That sounds tiring.
But we're working with one of the highest qualified sports scientists that I've ever met on his expertise of VO2 max testing. And we're working with him to redefine how we test a more dynamic athlete like a mountain biker versus how everyone's just relying on the road cycling type testing.
Yeah.
Basically, a full body test. We have already implemented that into our programs where we're doing intervals of conditioning, but not with heavy load like CrossFit, but with dynamic bodyweight movements for a particular amount of time in what we expect, like a heart rate zone, say. Do you imagine like a 5-minute downhill track? Why would you only be conditioned in your legs and, you're fit enough, but are you conditioned everywhere else enough? So by having the heart rate zone stimulated enough by the movements that better reflect downhill, then you're actually, you're using that VO2 max increasing science, but also in a conditioning level that better reflects your sport. So we're dissecting a lot of that in our YouTube videos We've got some high level, long form ones, but some shorter, punchier ones. Like there's one with Ethan. Actually, we uploaded a couple of weeks ago. That's a really good one to see how we're framing differently how we train mountain bikers versus road bikers on the science-backed principles.
Man, that's wicked. I really, really appreciate your time, and I think you and Jamie are going to connect so nicely once you get that data and he gets his data.
Jamie's going to come around us.
No, I've got so much respect for everyone, and I learned a lot from him, learned a lot from this one. So thanks for reaching out and for us to make this possible. So yeah, all the listeners out there, go follow both things. I think you can learn from both Jonny and Jamie. And thanks for what you're doing. I think it's really cool to check your Instagram and to look at the growth of that in a niche sport like mountain biking. Like I'm super proud that you're doing something like that. It's really cool. So carry on what you're doing.
Thank
and for
you.
the listeners
Thank
out
you.
there, the big thank you would be share it with a friend. I think Jonny will be stoked. And make sure you guys are subscribed, because the more that grows, the better I can do on the show. So thanks very much.
If anyone's watched to here and they're not subscribed, what the fuck? Just click it. Just say,
there we go.
Do it.
There's a content creator for you. Thanks, man. On both sides. Yeah. Till the next one. Peace, guys.
Thank you. Peace.